I'm 30 years old and I share a house with my sister. It's a 2-story house called a mother-daughter house, meaning it has 2 kitchens. My sister uses the downstairs and I use the upstairs. She isn't home a lot because she often stays with her boyfriend, who lives 20 miles away. Being home alone shouldn't scare me at my age, but sometimes it does. One night, while I was home alone, I was in my living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house has an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one big space. My couch is in the middle, so my back is to a large part of the room. For those who get scared easily, it wouldn't be the most comfortable place to watch a scary movie alone. I'll admit, as I watched in the dark with only the TV light, I found myself glancing over my shoulder a lot. I like to think I'm not the only 30-year-old guy who does that. Anyway, after the movie, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights, and went to sleep. My sleep lasted for about 2 hours before I woke up around 1 a.m. At first, I didn't know why I woke up, but then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like my sister, and it seemed like she was inside the house. I was still groggy and not thinking clearly. I thought she must be calling me or arguing with her boyfriend. I got out of bed and walked into the pitch black hallway, turned on the lights, and heard my sister's voice again from downstairs. This time, she was saying my name. I made my way downstairs in the dark, yelling back, "What is it?" I looked for the light switch but couldn't find it. I was really groggy. I walked down the hallway towards her kitchen, found the light switch, and turned it on. The light started off dim, but eventually brightened up, showing that no one was there. I checked her bedroom, but it was empty. I called her name loudly, but no one answered. Soon after, I heard something fall in her bedroom, which I had just checked and was empty. I hurried back upstairs to my bed and grabbed my phone. I tried calling her a few times, but she didn't pick up. I locked myself in my room, wondering if I had just imagined everything. Eventually, I fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up to a text from my sister asking why I called her at 1 a.m. I asked if she was home last night, and she told me no. She was staying at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to her bedroom to see what might have fallen, but there was nothing on the floor. I want to believe I imagined everything I heard that night, because the alternative would be much scarier. But I've never imagined things or had sleep problems before. So how clearly I heard my sister's voice and that sound in her room really freaks me out. This is the story of how I almost died as a kid, home alone. Possibly the most intense night of my life, with too much happening at once. We're a family of 5. I was 10 at the time, my older brother was 14, and my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night, and my brother was out with his friends causing trouble. Suddenly, we got a dreaded phone call. I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mom start freaking out and crying. I got really scared and rushed to see what was wrong. My mom was on the phone with a hospital, calling to inform my parents that my brother had been hit by a car. We were all shaken and really scared. My brother's leg was broken, but I don't know what else was said on the phone. My parents hurried to get their coats on, grabbed my little sister from her room, and asked me if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes, and they rushed out to the car and left. I was, of course, really worried about my brother, but I didn't want to go to the hospital and see him hurt. I don't think my parents wanted me or my sister to either, but they didn't want to leave my 5-year-old sister home without them. My brother recovered just fine, and his injury is no longer relevant to the story, except for being the reason why I was left home alone on a Friday night. Before my dad left, he was trying to calm down my mom, telling her my brother was going to be okay. Seeing my dad like that made me feel better. I felt like my mom was just being dramatic, like any mom would be. I continued playing the Star Wars game for a couple more hours when I heard the front door open. I had my bedroom door closed by this point. It was easily past midnight and past my bedtime, so I turned off the TV and PlayStation and crawled into my bed with my Game Boy. I tried listening to hear my parents' voices, maybe to see if my brother was with them, or just to hear what they were saying, but I didn't hear anything. After a few minutes of not hearing them even come up the stairs, I had a feeling something was wrong. I quietly opened my door and walked over to the banister that overlooked the living room. The lights were off, but there were 3 tall people standing in my living room. They weren't my family. I was so petrified that I was frozen for a second before I could quietly walk back into my room and shut the door as quietly as I could in my fear. But it wasn't quiet enough, and I knew it. They had to have heard the door click shut, even if just slightly. I hurried to my closet, opened it quietly, stepped inside, and shut the door. I hid behind a bunch of boxes and bags of clothes that was stuffed in my closet. I was pretty well hidden from view. There was a short period that felt like forever as I anticipated my bedroom door opening, and it did. At that moment, I knew I was going to die. I heard footsteps walk into the room. I couldn't tell how many people there were. It might have been 1. It might have been 2. I heard the footsteps move to my bed, and I heard my covers being moved. Then silence. Then more footsteps toward the closet door. Then silence for a few seconds. And then the closet door opened. My heart was in my throat by this point. All I did was sit quietly and hold my breath. The door was open for a really long time, but I didn't look up. I didn't move. It had to be a good 20 seconds of silence before the door closed again. Footsteps walked away from the door, then out of the room. I finally looked up and realized that from where I was crouched down behind the bags and boxes, I might have been visible to that person. It wasn't until probably an hour later that I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to them. The front door was left ajar by the people who broke in, and they had stolen a number of valuables from our house. It was a night that went from bad to worse for our family. My parents were in such a rush when they left for the hospital that they apparently didn't even lock the door. I was lucky not to have been killed or kidnapped. I look back now and really wonder if the person who opened the closet and just stood there for 20 seconds saw me hiding in there. Maybe he was just a guy that came to rob a house, not to kidnap or hurt a child. Or maybe he just didn't see me, and I narrowly escaped death or injury. I'm 23 years old, and I still live at home with my parents. One day, they were both out, and I was outside playing basketball in the front yard. At some point, I looked up at one of our upstairs windows and saw a woman standing there. She wasn't my mom or my sister, just a random woman. When she saw me looking at her, she quickly moved away from the window. I went inside and upstairs to check the lounge room, but she wasn't there. I checked every room, every bedroom, the bathroom, and all the closets. Then I checked downstairs, which included the living room, kitchen, dining room, one bedroom, and more closets. Finally, I checked the basement, though I doubted she could be there. It's a small basement with a couple of couches, a bar, and 2 closets. Not many places to hide. When I opened the second closet door, I was really scared since it was the last place I hadn't checked. I yanked the door open, like ripping off a band-aid, and pushed myself into the closet, just in case she was in there. But all I found were coats and hangers. I was so confused. I wasn't going to question my sanity, though. I definitely saw that woman. It wasn't something I could have imagined. I went back to the middle floor and shouted loudly that whoever was in the house needed to get out. I screamed so loudly that our next door neighbor came over and asked if I was okay. I told him I had just seen a woman at our upstairs window watching me play basketball. He came in and helped me search again. When we couldn't find her, I assumed she had snuck out through the back door, which I had unlocked to grab the basketball from the yard. After my neighbor left, I locked all the doors and called my parents to tell them the crazy story. They weren't thrilled, but asked me to make sure nothing was stolen. I did, and luckily, everything valuable was still in place. Later that night, I checked the house one more time for peace of mind before going to sleep. It was hard to fall asleep because my mind was racing. Most people can't relate to seeing a stranger inside their house, but my restlessness helped me in this situation. As I was finally starting to drift off, I heard noises from the other side of my bed. I had the fan on, so the room wasn't silent, and I didn't immediately turn at the first sound. But the noises became more distinct, human-like sounds. I turned to my other side, and there she was, getting out from under my bed. She stood up tall above the bed, and I screamed louder than before. I jumped out of bed, tackled her to the floor, and had my hand around her throat, asking who she was. My doorbell rang. It was my neighbor again. I picked the tall, dirty-looking woman up off the floor and dragged her to the front door as she struggled and scratched at me. I still have 2 scars on my right arm from her claws. I opened the front door to my neighbor, and he let himself in and helped me restrain the woman. Then I called the police. The whole time we waited for the police, the woman was screaming and cursing at us, threatening us too. She looked and acted like a meth addict going through withdrawal. When the police arrived, one of the officers recognized her immediately. They had dealt with her before. Her name was, ironically, Karen. It was satisfying to watch her be put into the back of the police car. I thanked my neighbor for coming so quickly to help. That night, my mind continued to race, but instead of being completely freaked out, which I still was a little, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. I can't fully explain why.